Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Delaney's People, a novel in small stories, by Beth Duke, narrated by Amy Mcfadden and Chris Abernathy. Jules. Margaret, 2006. There are diamonds in the red clay of northeast Alabama. Delaney is one of them. She is my great-granddaughter. On Wednesdays, her mother brings her by after her toddler tumble class. Delaney sits on my lap and pats my necklace. She never pulls, twists, or tries to eat my various necklaces. She just pats them delicately with her tiny dimpled hand, like soft moonlight whispering over the pearls. She seems to love faceted crystal beads and rhinestones in particular. Delaney is my grandson Tommy's daughter, and so much like him I'm convinced his wife Lisa was just an incubator. Her hair is a soft cloud of curly golden ringlets, and her huge brown eyes crinkle like his when she laughs. She laughs often, like the Irish ancestors whose names she bears. She smells like Cheerios and baby soap. When she comes to Arlington Shores, my neighbors envy my 30 minutes of joy. Gloria Ledbetter peeks through her curtains to glare when they arrive. Mr. Henderson always greets them from his tiny front porch, and Bitsy Miller will wave if she's out walking. Most of us think that a retirement community probably shouldn't share its name with the best-known cemetery in the country. We like it here, but the running joke is that they come and attach a headstone to your condo door when your time's up, as in Arlington snores. As Delaney pats my jewelry, I am transported to the time when I first wore it long ago. I may not have been Babe Paley, but in my day I spent lots of time, and even more money, at Gelfman's department store on chic clothes and the latest costume jewelry. My collection includes pieces by Haskell, Hobey, Trifari. There's over 60 years' worth of jewelry in my closet, and all of it has a memory or two attached. The first time Lisa brought Delaney over, I was wearing my triple strand of faux pearls with the rhinestone spacers and my periwinkle dress, as I had been to my weekly old lady bridge game. Delaney really likes that one, because sometimes it creates rainbows on the wall. I bought it in 1952 and wore it with an elegant black shirtwaist to Daryl's fundraising dinner when he ran for state senate. He never came close to winning, but I looked fabulous at that event. Somewhere there's a newspaper clipping that shows Daryl, me, Carolyn and Dennis Tharp, and Julia Neese with her husband. We'd had a lot of wine that night, and my arm was resting lightly on Daryl's shoulder. He was leaning forward and ever so slightly toward Carolyn. I didn't know at the time that he was leaning a lot more toward her at the office. We looked shiny, polished and new, so young and happy in our world. Another of Delaney's favorites is the citrus Miriam Haskell bead torque. In 1940 we spent our first year on Cottonwood Avenue, in the only house Daryl and I ever owned. It was the one where I baked endless cookies, where I rolled bandages a few years later for World War II, where I kissed boo-boos and sat up all night with Ellen because she had the croup. When she pats that one, I see myself spending $20 for it at a time when that was a month's groceries. I loved it too much to pass it up, though, and Daryl's practice was doing well. When Ellen was born, Daryl gave me the most exquisite McClelland Barclay sterling silver choker, a vine with a dangling floral design. I wore it constantly, and when Ellie was teething, I let her clamp down on a flower now and then. The tiny teeth marks are still there, and I treasure it as much for that as for anything else. Delaney adores her Grandma Ellen, and I've tried to explain that she made those marks as a baby years ago. I don't think she quite believes me, though. Grandma Ellen has always been 60 with silver hair in her mind, though she once had Tommy and Delaney's golden ringlets. The 60 part might be right, however, as my little Ellie was a serious and brilliant infant. She was speaking in complete sentences at 1½ knew her alphabet before she was 2, and regularly settled arguments among her less mature playmates. She examines a brass kaleidoscope my father gave me for my 12th birthday, a Limoges Eiffel Tower Darrell bought me in Paris, and then a silver filigree music box from Ellen. Delaney gazes intently at them, poised with her arms folded carefully behind her back. She leans forward, looking remarkably like Foghorn Leghorn as she explores my étagère. I'll give Lisa credit for that. Thanks to her gentle suggestion, we don't touch Mama D's pretty things. Lisa is one of those modern mothers whose lips are incapable of forming the word no. I imagine her saying, "Now, Delaney, let's take our fingers out of the electrical socket and color instead." Fortunately, my great-granddaughter is a naturally well-behaved child. If Lisa has another, she may find no a bit more acceptable. We'll see. I take the kaleidoscope down and let Delaney squint her eye to look inside. She's every bit as captivated by the colors, patterns, and sparkles as I am. It's the reason she shares my love for the brilliant rhinestones and rainbows in my jewelry. We can ooh and ah together for hours, this child and I. Delaney doesn't know it yet, but she's exceptionally beautiful. Really, that's not idle great-grandmother talk. Lisa is threatening to put her in one of those insipid baby beauty pageants, and though I don't comment, I pray she doesn't. Not commenting is the hardest part of being 90 years old and watching the mistakes your progeny makes. Everyone thinks old people don't have opinions, but we do. We know enough to keep them to ourselves most of the time. For instance, when Lisa wears her green floral capri pants, or when she puts those huge fluffy socks on poor Delaney that make her look like a tottering Clydesdale. My great-granddaughter is very talkative while she's in my lap today, and I suspect Lisa has told her nice things to say to Mama D. Where else would she get the idea to ask how I'm feeling, and if I enjoyed my bridge game? Toddlers don't talk that way, and I prefer when she lets Delaney say whatever's on her mind. Usually that's whether there's ice cream in my freezer, or if I know that her puppy still pee-pees in the living room sometimes. She used to think there could be a monster under her bed, but it was my abernation. Mickey Mouse is definitely not just her abernation, because she has seen him and he's real. And, most solemnly, Delaney plans to wear big girl pennies very soon. Her mommy bought them in pink because that's her favorite color, except for purple. I remember a sparkling pink and lavender rhinestone Schiaparelli parure. That was for Mrs. Mackenzie's 100th birthday luncheon. I wore it with a very smart knit suit in cream. You should have seen Delaney's eyes light up when she saw that glittering jewelry. On that day, everything got padded. The bracelet, the brooch, the earrings, and, of course, the necklace. It was my most extravagant jewelry purchase ever, but a lady deserves something very special for inspiration when she's starting a new life. I didn't think Darrell should get to skimp on my final charge to our account at Gelfman's. I was standing in the kitchen packing Ellen's lunch when the call came. At first I thought she had the wrong number, because she simply couldn't be looking for me. I even told her she was looking for a different Margaret Parker, though there weren't any others in our town. How do you respond when an anonymous woman calls to tell you that your husband is having an affair with his secretary? For the first 15 minutes I thought it must be some kind of joke. I hung up the phone, finished making the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and calmly drove Ellie to school. I sat there, numb, in the parking lot, reliving 100 little moments when I should have known. The next minute, I'd be convinced that this nightmare was someone else's. It was a mistake. It was a mix-up. Darrell would explain it. Darrell could always explain everything. Then I remembered his secretary Carolyn's new rhinestone bracelet, the one she'd shown me the previous week. It caught my eye as soon as I saw her arm, so naturally I took a closer look. "Oh, it's just paste, Margaret. You know I could never afford such a thing on my salary," she exclaimed. I found that curious. It was unbelievably brilliant, so much so that I couldn't help but ask, "Where did you find such a treasure?" She replied, "I really can't remember. I'm not even sure what store it was." In retrospect, she was downright consumed with the work on her desk that day and didn't seem to want to chat. Suddenly, I had a terrible suspicion about Carolyn's jewelry. I raced home, dug through my husband's oh-so-orderly desk, and found the truth under a black plastic drawer tray, a receipt from Couch's jewelers for a diamond bracelet. I don't own a diamond bracelet. I made my usual trip to the grocery store, bought 3 cans of slimy oysters, and then emptied them carefully into the space beneath the spare tire in Darrell's beloved new Buick. Had I ever really believed he needed to work late 4 nights a week? Could any woman be more stupid, more delusional, more betrayed? I sobbed as I choked on my cruel and jagged new stereotype. I had been the smiling wife of a successful attorney, a devoted mother, the first vice president of the Junior League. I was the last to know, the first to cry, the first to want to bludgeon. I removed a dark pin from my hair and twisted it around in the trunk lock until it broke off clean. "Here's my heart, Darrell." I drove home and packed my husband's clothes, a few of his least favorite things, and a note saying that he didn't live in our house anymore. The boxes were waiting for him on the front porch when he got home that night. Ellie and I were at my mother's house. The next few years were the hardest of my life. Ellen and I fought a lot, but I made allowances because I knew how much she missed her father. I waited a long time to tell Ellie what he'd done, because I couldn't cause her any more pain. I took the blame for our divorce until I decided one day I could no longer bear her silence, her surliness, and the weight of her accusation. Eventually, she forgave her father. I never did. Occasionally, I let Delaney try on a Trifari necklace I bought in the 50s. It has deep blue glass beads with tiny green flower accents. I wore it on my first day as a sales clerk at Gelfman's jewelry counter. It always brought me luck, and eventually it brought me a handsome man named Carl when he told me it matched my eyes. We were married for 37 years. His absence is still a constant presence, but it only whispers to me now, and I don't cry. Carl was one of those men you see in commercials, the kind who illustrate how men age beautifully and women don't. At 50, he already had a lot of gray in his brown hair and the most dazzling smile that gathered the wrinkles beside his deep brown eyes. His wife died 2 years before I met him, of some sort of cancer. The poor man had successfully resisted the attempts his friends made to introduce a new romance. He came into Gelfman's to buy a birthday present for his niece, Angela, and I sold him a perfect sparkling Monet bracelet with tiny cherubs around it. He left with my phone number and our future woven together in his mind. That's what he told the guests at our wedding. Delaney will never fully understand how she brought light and joy back into my life after Carl died. What rapture I felt the first time I touched her tiny face and watched her fingers curl around mine. She is my future, the hopes and dreams of a very old lady. My will is very clear. My jewelry goes to my great-granddaughter, and she is to keep and enjoy it. I hope Delaney wears her favorites from time to time. I hope I get to accompany her to her prom in the form of my Weiss rhinestone choker. I hope she wears my pearls at her wedding. I hope her daughter likes to pat every single bit of it and feels the love I left behind.
A Diamond. Sam, 1916. My father-in-law, his father Patrick, and I sat in the rocking chairs on the front porch. The women carried piles of bloody sheets and cloth out the front door, sweat dripping from their faces in the July heat. Each smiled at us reassuringly, but I was certain that my Nancy could not possibly be alive. Doc Phillips had been in there since 10 o'clock last night. His motor car was parked next to my barn full of mules, a shiny black pestilence that scattered the screaming chickens when he roared up. "She's all right, son," Jack Delaney offered, eyes firmly fixed on mine. I was afraid he was going to ask me to pray with him again, and I didn't have the strength to do it. All I wanted in this world was to know that my wife and son were healthy. Nancy had stopped screaming hours ago. More recently, her sister Eula offered a terse, "Mother and baby are all right, Sam. You should get some rest." I could no more relax at this point than chew a hole through the wooden boards under me. "Your nerves are shot, boy." Patrick smiled at me. "How about we have a drink to celebrate the new baby? A toast to wee Patrick." Nancy's Irish grandfather never missed a chance to drink whiskey, in celebration or melancholy. It might be 11 o'clock in the morning, but his ancient internal monitor was telling him a drop was required to get through whatever the rest of this day might bring. "Let's wait for Doc Phillips, Patrick," I said, though I could have used something to steady my shaking hands. I looked at my worn old black boots and thought about what it would mean to have a son to help me in the fields. Our older daughter, Esther, had a back as strong as any boy in Cleburne County. Her little sister, Deirdre, had her head in the clouds most days. I suppose at 6 she was still entitled to spend more time daydreaming than working on her chores. Nancy said so, but she was awfully soft on the girls. They were at Mrs. Wilson's down the road. I was grateful they had been spared the night of worry over their mother. The screen door groaned suddenly, and I glanced up expecting to see more linens being toted out to the washtub. Arthur Phillips was smoothing his white hair back from his wrinkled forehead, hat and bag in his spotted left hand. "Gentlemen, Nancy and the babe are doing all right. Sam, I would like to speak with you privately. Would you walk me out to my car?" "Your wife has been through quite an ordeal, Sam," he began, looking to the cloudless blue sky as if for divine inspiration. "She lost a right lot of blood last night, but she will recover. The thing is, Sam, her woman parts are never going to allow her to bear another child. Do you understand what I am telling you, son?" "I think I do, Doc. We've been blessed with 2 daughters and a son. I cannot ask the Lord for more than that, can I?" I smiled briefly into the old man's eyes, trying to determine if this was his way of telling me that I could never have relations with my wife again. "Not exactly, Sam." He stopped and kicked the tire at the rear of his Ford, hard enough to shake the car a bit. "Your new baby is a fine, beautiful daughter. Nancy wanted me to be the one to tell you." "A girl?" I was rendered speechless for a minute. Suddenly, the idea of getting into Doc's motor car and riding away with him seemed like a good idea. I would rather do that than face Nancy's disappointment and try to hide my own. "We were sure this time. Mrs. Hawkins told Nancy 2 months ago she was carrying a boy, without a doubt. She did some sort of test on her that never fails." Doc looked back at the sky, as if I were trying his medical patience mightily with the midwife's foolishness. "Well, Sam, those so-called tests are not very reliable. I'm sorry you didn't get the son you wanted, but take this child from God and love her with all your heart. She is as pretty a baby as I have ever seen, and I have held a good many. Go be with them now. Nancy is waiting for you." With that, he patted my back and walked around to the front of the shiny Ford to turn the crank over and over. Nothing happened, and for the 1,000th time I wondered why a man would suffer the aggravation of these toys when a fine horse could provide reliable transportation and companionship too. Finally, the engine sputtered to life, scattering the hens once more. Doc waved goodbye as he bounced down our rutted clay driveway. I remembered that instant that my horse, a chestnut Tennessee walker named Thunder, was gone forever. Nancy didn't know yet, but I traded him a week ago for something dear. My sister Carrie would be long in forgiving me for parting with our father's prize stallion. I dreaded telling her, and decided it could wait until she visited from Savannah in 2 months. I'd have to write and tell her to bring trinkets for another niece. Nothing blue. I trudged back to the porch, Patrick and Jack eyeing me like I was a bedraggled stranger picking my way through the chickens, not the family member they had counted on for near 9 years to take care of Nancy and everyone else who came running when times were hard. I straightened up and tried to look joyful. I reckoned joyful was what they were expecting from me, and I didn't want to let them down. Doc says Nancy's going to be on her feet soon, and we have a beautiful baby daughter. I smiled. I'm going to go in and see them, and y'all can come on in a few minutes, all right? Patrick and Jack glanced at each other quickly, a Sunday sermon of unspoken words between them, then nodded to me in unison. Old Pat brushed off his pants and muttered quietly, I believe I'll look for that drink. Nancy was propped up on the rose-print pillows. I could see she was making an effort to hide that she had been crying, though the dark red and green splotches amid the lighter flowers gave her away. I want to call her Margaret, she offered, her gaze vaguely directed toward the tiny wood cradle. Margaret is a fine name, Nan. I could see her shoulders starting to shake. Sam, the doctor said... Hush, sweet Nan. We will talk about this later. Let me see if this girl is as pretty as her mama. I reached into the cradle and picked up the tiny bundle, trying not to awaken it and bring on more female hysteria. She was a lovely thing, all right. Dark hair peeked out from her white cap, and she had long brown eyelashes that did not seem possible on a newborn babe. She squirmed under all the swaddling the women used to encase her body. I wondered if they knew it was nearly 100 degrees outside, but thought better than to question their methods. As if on cue, Eula appeared in the doorway. Nancy's sister had the most annoying way of intruding on any moment people shared privately. I'd been wishing for years she would get a husband and move out of her weary father's house, but Eula was not blessed overmuch in the looks department. She was gloomy and bitter, and her tongue was sharp enough to slice an onion. Her breath usually smelled like she had done just that. All we could do was hope that some poor half-blind boy might take a shine to her figure, which was slender and about all she had to offer. Sam, is it all right if I tell Daddy and Papa to come in now? She asked. I would have liked a few more minutes alone with my wife and this Margaret in a soft pink wrapper, but I knew we had all shared a rough night, and I needed to be gracious and let folks get home. If Patrick were left too long with my corn whiskey, he'd be sleeping on the sofa in the parlor before I could stop him. Of course, Eula. I smiled and gently swung the bundle back and forth. Nancy looked out the bedroom's only window, searching for words to offer the Delaney males. My wife held out her skinny arms, gesturing for me to place the baby there. As her father and grandfather walked in, she put on a brave smile and nodded. I knew she was missing her mother and grandmother. It didn't seem right having to share this moment with only men. My heart wrenched at the new thought. I would never have a son to carry on the Dawson name. Patrick was spry for an old man. His big frame carried 200 pounds, and I figured he could still beat a fellow 20 years his junior. He reached out and took my new daughter from Nancy, hugging her to his massive chest. "Oh, Nancy girl, your Margaret is a beauty like her own mother." He pulled at the layers of cloth, trying to get some air to the poor thing. The women would have fussed, but I was on his side. The baby started to wake. Instead of handing her back, Patrick continued his exploration, fixated on Margaret's neck. "What's this?" He squinted, one white eyebrow raised. "I think it's a wee birthmark." He froze, staring hard. "Oh, it can't be." "But it is." I was amazed to see a tear running down the old man's cheek, tracing a wrinkle to his whiskered chin. He handed Margaret back to Nancy, awkwardly rubbing his face with the back of his arm. "What's wrong, Papa?" Nancy looked down at our daughter, still fighting her blanket prison but not making a sound. I decided I should let Jack have a moment, then take the men out so Nan could feed her. Jack was watching his father carefully. Rather than take the baby, he said, "Nancy, I'll come back tomorrow when you've had a rest. I need to get your grandfather home." Nancy was clearly wondering what had disturbed Patrick. She kept examining the baby and simply nodded at her father. They did not share a great deal of affection, and I was relieved when he offered to go. When we reached the porch, Patrick said, "Sam, the babe has a wee red diamond on her neck. You don't know the story behind God's message to me, but I do. Your Margaret will have a blessed life." With that, he picked up his hat from the rocking chair and nodded to Jack. "Wait a minute, Pat. What story?" "Oh, 'tis nothing bad, Sam. Not to worry. Me mother Mary Kathleen made herself known to me today, that's all." With that cryptic statement, he climbed down the stone steps and headed for Jack's wagon. My father-in-law offered, "He's an old man, Sam, but he lost his mother at an age to make her a saint in his mind. You know that. There's a legend dating back to his days in Ireland about a diamond, but I've never heard the whole thing. I'll get him a glass or two of whiskey later and get it out of him." I shrugged my shoulders and turned to find Eula standing in the doorway, silently scolding me the way women do to men everywhere. I had no idea what I'd done wrong, but I quickly decided to go feed our animals and give her time to leave. After an eternity, Eula mounted her horse and headed toward home. I tiptoed back into the still house to find Nancy snoring softly, the pink bundle under her arm. I spotted a small red diamond shape behind the baby's left ear and stroked it gently with my thumb. Margaret turned her head toward it, still sound asleep. My wife did not get a diamond ring when I asked her to marry me. Thunder was gone, but I had a small token to celebrate the birth of our new child. I slipped the velvet box under Nancy's pillow as she cradled our daughter, a tired smile on her lips. God Loves Darrell. Darrell, 1933. The young men were kings in this town, though their kingdom was desolate much of the time these days. Fortunate sons, home from college, Vanderbilt University no less, for summer at the height of the Great Depression. One will be in love by fall semester, and the other will be sentenced to stay at home, his father losing the last vestige of the income they'd thought would flow forever from the fabric mill. The national mood had been lifted slightly, along with Prohibition. So many sorrows to drown. It made no difference to these two, accustomed to the best white lightning in the county. They planned to meet Parsons, their bootlegger, at 12:15 a.m. out on Highway 7, briefly interrupting his weekly run to Birmingham. First, though, they had this Saturday night. Starry, breezy, mysterious, throbbing with young man excitement. They were, improbably, hiding in a hay barn. They followed a girl, a newcomer, more exotic and beautiful than any they've seen here or in Nashville. Her hair was long and deep brown, almost black. Her eyes were huge and luminescent dark amber, and her skin was a perfect creamy light tan, as though she loved the sun. Her body, it was the reason the boys followed her discreetly in the moonlight, headlamps extinguished, for 3 miles from town. She and her friend, a lesser being, have settled on the front porch. Darrell wanted to watch her on the porch until they had to return to his car, hidden in the woods 100 yards away. Parsons wouldn't wait, so they had to leave by midnight. They hoped to see into her bedroom window first. She was walking arm in arm with her friend out of King Kong at the appropriately named Princess Theater. Darrell, used to picking young girls like ripe apples from his family's orchard, was rendered shy and cautious by her beauty. He said to Hoyt, "I'm going to have this girl. She's my damn gift for 2 semesters of grueling study at Vandy." God loved him, always had. They tried to figure out who her family is. The farm used to belong to the Lead.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?